Welcome to my how to build a Tamiya Mini 4-wheel drive AR chassis, Cyclone Magnum Premium. This will be a complete guide for beginners who want to follow along while I build a Tamiya Mini 4-wheel drive kit from start to finish. If you have not watched my complete review of the Cyclone Magnum Premium, where I discussed the kits and gave my opinion on the completed kit, then please check that video out in my complete build series playlist. There you'll find other videos that will cover other Tamiya chassis in more detail. Also, if you find this video useful, please hit that like button and share it with your friends or any aspiring racers. Going over the manual quickly, which basically shows you the tools again. So screwdriver, modeling knife, side cutters, spray paint optional to cut the parts using side cutters. So yeah, it just shows you just an example. So again, look at the manual, it is numbered. Generally a lot easier if you follow it step by step. So the first part pretty much covers the cowl, assembling it, and then applying the stickers. And also here, note that it does tell you to apply the paint. So this is the Tamiya paint number X18 semi-gloss black, and TS26 is pure white. So you have the chassis. Next part is installing the propeller shaft, and then also the rollers for the rear underside. Then after that, so you have there the eyelets. The tires installed on the wheels, and you just push them onto the shaft. On the back shows you here how to apply the pinion gear. Next step is to install it on the chassis. This part here covers the installation of the terminals as well on the front, and then the switch. Then you have installing the cover for the switch and also the terminals on the front of the chassis. Last, installing the rear skid bar and how to mount the batteries. Make sure you do this properly. If you don't, the car will actually go in reverse, and also you risk damaging the terminals. Step 12 pretty much covers how to turn it on. Obviously there's a switch. Make sure you the switch all the way until it snaps. A lot of times, for new racers or even returning racers, you actually end up not pushing it all the way, and then when you drop it, the switch actually goes back off and the car doesn't start, or it stops once it hits the track. That's an instant loss. And then finally, with the cowl finished, then you just install it on the chassis itself, and then use the lock to secure the cowl to the chassis. Okay, so let's start the build. Alright, so first off, let's remove cowl and the 8 parts from the plastic. Okay, so we got the cowl, Cyclone Magnum cowl, and then your 8 parts. We'll begin with these. Usually, if you look at the manual, you will see that the parts that it will specify. So the way you can tell is by checking out for this one, it says for the cowl it says D2, this is D part, so 2 on that one over there. So that's pretty much just the basics. So same thing goes with your 8 parts. It does say A on it. See? So letter A. And then parts numbered. So we have 1, 2 over there, 3 over there. Alright, let's begin by cutting. First tip, when you're cutting your parts, try not to cut all the way into the piece. So try to leave some space. I mean, you could, but usually it's a good practice not to cut all the way through. You can trim those parts later anyway. Some of these pieces are very small, so make sure you don't lose them. Speaking of which, the last parts I'm gonna cut will be the eyelets and then the rollers. Yeah, you can just pretty much cut straight here. So again, try to cut as close as you can, but there's still gonna be something left there, so we'll clean that later. And make sure you don't lose these. Very small. So you notice there's actually five of these, and they're usually installed on the chassis, but one of it will actually be installed on the counter gear. So I'll show you that later. Trying to see if there's like any extra pieces like here. Didn't cut all the way through there. So see if you can get that with your side cutters. Sharper side cutter would make a cleaner cut. See here, so this was the part early on that I was like trying not to cut through, so it's probably one of the reasons, good reasons for you not to cut all the way through to something, especially if you're not sure if that's part of the runner or actually part of the piece itself. So this is actually important since this will lock it into the chassis. So in case you do need to trim it a little bit more, you could use something like sandpaper. So these are just homemade sanding strips that I cut. I glued it onto these popsicle sticks. So you just sand it just to get it. You want to, really optional. Most of the time, like if you cut it already this much, shouldn't be necessary unless it's really long. Use a higher grit to get more of whatever's in there, like really sand it down. You want to smooth it down, so you just use higher grit. I'm sorry, did I mention higher grit? I said this is a low grit and then high grit to make a smoother finish. So definitely important to do that for the eyelets, because if you have too much left on the nubs, it'll probably be very tight fit and it'll probably be misaligned as well. So when you install the shafts on these, it'll be misaligned. So yeah, these I guess will be necessary to sand. Just make sure they're as even as you can get it, but not too much, because you can get the same problem if you sand it too much. Again, this won't be necessary if you have a sharp side cutter, since that will usually it'll cut that small part clean and leave you with a clean finish. Same thing when cutting the wheels from the runners. Try to cut as close as possible. Again, usually I try and trim those pieces. Usually this should be enough. You don't have to sand it, but I've gotten used to sanding these pieces, so that's why I'm doing this. But totally optional. Same example, you cut it like this and left really a big piece there, and then it, see that, and then sand it down. When it bounces, there's potential that when the wheel deforms, it will actually reach that point. Potentially that could cause your car to go off course. Yeah, for the wheels, make sure that those nubs are really trimmed as much as possible and sand them down to avoid that kind of a problem. Doesn't really need to be very clean, but again, if you have something like a god hand nipper, so probably don't need to go through the steps, since it will shear off the runner clean. Okay, all right, cutting these. So simple tip, what you could do, give it a slight tug and then snap it all the way. So see, comes up clean. Same thing on the other side, just a slight tug, don't actually pull it. So right, let's just do the rest of the wheels. So usually I start working on the chassis first, and then putting in the eyelet. So it doesn't really matter which side you put, should technically be the same. So you really just need to put in the hole And that's it. Just make things all uniform. Just inside and apply the same thing with the rest. Okay, I'm done. Okay, let's go in and open the rest of the pieces. Again, propeller shaft, 2 wheel shafts, grease motor, your step screws, regular screws sometimes. Oh, and also this gear shaft itself. And then there's a pinion gear for the motor. Then you have your terminals, and then you have the gears. This is 3.5:1 ratio. What that means is the motor, this will spin 3.5 times before the wheel itself will rotate 1 time. Okay, so let's take out the gears. Right, so this is your counter gear. These 2 are the crown gears, and this is your spur gear. So I think they call it a spur gear because it looks like a spur of a cowboy's boots, if you know what that is. You need to put the shaft through the counter gear, and then the remaining eyelet will go here to support it, so give it some more room to spin. See there, even without a grease, it spins quite nicely. Okay, let's start first with installing the tires on the wheels and then on the shafts. So take note that the shaft should be hexagonal in shape. The wheels themselves have also a hex shape. Anyway, let's just install the wheels first. So for the wheels, so usually you have there like this rounded side and then flat side. So the flat side goes here. Right. Okay, just push it all the way through. No spaces. Yeah, same thing. Flat side here. So all the tires are the same, so it doesn't really matter which wheel they'll go on. Last one. Yeah. Now for installing the shaft, just try to feel that hex shape. Usually, yep, okay. Try to like spin it while you're pushing it through, and then you'll feel it go in slightly, and then just make sure you have everything level and just apply an even force. Push it down, and there you go. Simple. So, alright, so like what I said, you'll need to make sure that the wheel is actually aligned. So just to check it, just put it installed into the chassis. Okay, so just check for alignment to spin it. Yeah, there's a terrible wiggle there. So I'll correct that one. But before we do that, let's just install the other wheel. This is actually the front. Don't try to push it immediately. Just try to rotate it until you feel it. Just go in, try to find that notch where it's supposed to go. If it doesn't work, try the other side. Make sure everything is level. Gently press down. Apply an even force if you can. Test it. Okay, so just open up your grease. Just twist this, very easy to twist off. Just a tip, you could use some like this old paintbrush to apply the grease, make things spread it more easily. Essentially what you need to do is take your crown gear, put it here in front, and then what you need to do is just apply just a little bit of grease near the end here. So try to apply it just at the end, but not into the wheel itself. And then just apply a little bit as well onto the eyelets, to the contact area. So you want to apply the grease on parts that could cause friction. So yeah, so there, and okay. And for the other side, do the same thing. Just apply some of that leftover grease. I usually try to like align like the spokes, so try to find like one spoke, see if that will match. One of those should align, and you just push them all the way as much as you can, and there should be just a little wiggle room. Yeah, also wiggle here, so I'll correct that later. For now, let's just make sure it's installed. Let's do the other side. Okay, for the rear, same thing. Apply just a little bit of grease at the end. Alright, so you take your spur gear there, crown gear, a bit of grease surrounding the eyelets, not in the hole. I do that so that the end of it doesn't get any grease on it. If you have grease on this one and then you put it into the wheel, it could loosen it. You can wipe it off if you need to. Push it straight through, align it with the spur gear and the crown gear. Apply some grease again here. Take some tissue, make sure that there's no grease at the tip. Although not uncommon, it was weird that all 4 wheels had alignment issues. I eventually corrected these, and as it turns out, the problem was both wheel axles or shafts were not straight. So I ended up replacing both, and that fixed the problem. Let me know if you still want to see that video so I can add that to the playlist as well. Otherwise, I will post a separate wheel alignment tutorial that will have a better example showing like 1 or 2 misaligned wheels, and will not be solved by just replacing the axles. So for the counter gear and the shaft, now let's apply some grease as well. Right here, and there. Okay, so how to mount that on the chassis? So just make sure the propeller shaft will go in there, and then there's a notch where it should rest the shaft. See? So, and to keep that in place, so you have this gear cover, this part here, you'll hook underneath, and then just push down, and it'll snap. Okay, next thing is let's install the terminals. Before handling the terminals, since we were touching the grease earlier, and we definitely got some on our hands, good idea to actually clean your hands. So the long one goes here. Now here, a slight snap. And do the other one, and then just push it. Snap. For the front terminals, you'll need a switch. This curved section here goes onto that post, and then the switch. So you have that curved section pointing that way. It will be placed here in this curved section as well. You'll then need to take the cover. You need to push it down this way. This, right, and align it with the switch. You'll need to press it, push it forward a bit and then down, and that locks it. And the switch. Okay. So again, when you're actually racing, make sure you push this all the way until it clicks. Let's first install the pinion gear onto the motor. So there's a flat edge here and then a bevel at the top. This will face the motor. Best to lay it on like a flat surface and then just line it and push down. Okay, so make sure that you make it flush and not push this farther than that, because that could cause problems for the transmission. Also, make sure that it's flush as well and not protruding, because that could also cause a problem for the transmission. So let's install it onto the motor housing. This is the orientation. Okay, and just push it and snaps into place. Okay, before installing the propeller shaft, let's apply some grease to the gears again. Just take your brush and just spin it. Try to apply it on like the back where there could potentially be friction. It's almost the teeth of the crown gear. Let's do the same thing for the front. You'll also need to apply some grease to parts where the shaft is going to go. So if you install the shaft, right, so let's apply some grease to some of these sections. And let's just close up the front first. Which again, slide it here, and then push up and then down. Okay. And then install the motor. So it should just go freely. And then to close it, take your motor cover, undercarriage cover, whatever you call it, just the hooks there. So we'll go to these underneath here. These tabs go underneath that, and just push down and snap. So if you want to remove these, so press here and then push it up. And for the front, if you want to remove the front, so you need to push down there, push, push, release. Okay. Battery cover, so place it like that, push down, push back, release, press, pull. Okay. Alright. And you have now built an AR chassis. Okay, let's install the rollers and the rest of the screws. The kit will come with 6 step screws for the 6 roller, and then also these washers. How these are gonna be installed. First off, what you want to do is get a little bit grease onto the step screws, just the body. Alright, just a little, not too much. And obviously insert it, so it doesn't matter which direction, these are symmetrical. And then the washers go underneath. And if there's, just in case, try to wipe it down before you screw it onto the screw holes. For the rear, if you want the car to turn corners faster, put it in the front. Putting it on the back will make it slower but more stable. So regarding the screws, what I typically do is pre-drill the holes to loosen it a bit so that the step screws can be installed much easier. And I try to align the screw as much as possible, make it straight. So see here, it's relatively straight. For the front though, you'll need to make sure that you follow the angle. If you're gonna try this yourself, make sure that you follow that angle, there's a slight angle in the front, and then it should be straight there, so it's perpendicular. The rear bumper should also be straight. Continue screwing it halfway, and then you're done. You can install rollers. Finished one side just to show you an example of how the roller should look if you install it properly. So again, if you look at the back, so these should be fairly straight. This one isn't straight mainly because of the rollers is hanging, but otherwise the screws themselves are straight. Now for the front, if you look carefully, there's actually just a slight angle to it. See? So it's actually slanting downward. Let's just try it on the other side. Okay, so just recheck. Everything is as tight as it can be, but don't over tighten the screws. So, okay, there we go. Just wanted to quickly check. So this is the cowl from the Cyclone Magnum Premium. Just want to compare it with this old kit, Cyclone Magnum, original Cyclone Magnum, released on the Super TZ chassis. See? So let's check. Cowl right there. I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up, but this is yellowed slightly, I think. But from the looks of it, it's really the same mold. Nothing is changed. Anyway, just wanted to show that you essentially get the same cowl on the old and the new kits. Okay, finally we can move on to the cowl. So just take it off the runner. See those small nubs? Just clean that up just a bit. Apply the stickers there. Just fit. Get the lock. Press it. Make sure you press it together. Don't try to force it. You could break it. It's gonna be bad if you break it. You'll end up having to replace either the cowl or the chassis altogether. And just twist and lock. And then for the battery orientation, so this is the positive side, so yeah, there, positive and then negative terminals, and then push it forward. Same with the other one, and switch on. The process of applying stickers to it is fairly straightforward. Also, I wanted to shorten the video as much as I can, so I left that out of this build video. Let me know if you want to see that still, and I'll post that as a separate video and include that in the playlist. For new racers, this part is optional, but if you want to find out the speed of the car, then you can use several methods. One is by using a digital tachometer. I use an app called Geary. Another is by using the Tamiya speed checker. So as you can see, speeds of 19 to 20 kph is pretty standard for a box stock motor. So rather than immediately running the car on the track, one thing you should always do is to subject it to a break-in process. What that is essentially is a means to increase the output of the motor. There are several ways to do this, but the simplest method for new racers is to simply let the chassis run continuously up to 3 to 5 minutes. And usually to do this, you just put it on a flat surface, something to elevate the wheels so that it doesn't touch the ground. You can tape it if you want. If you do this, that should break in the motor, increase the output, and also cause the gears and essentially the transmission of the entire car to mesh properly. Now, just a disclaimer, you do this at your own risk, since running the motor over an extended period of time without applying any lubricant or coolant can cause it to burn out. So if there are other racers around or experienced racers around, it may be best for you to ask them nicely about breaking in the motor for you. Okay, so we're going to clean the motor. I have here some all-purpose or multi-purpose maintenance lube, so you can choose the brand that you want. So we're gonna spray just a little here. If you did not find any increase in speed after your first attempt, then simply repeat the process a few more times. Usually it could take you up to like a total of 6 times to get some increase in the speed. Just make sure to reverse the polarity of the batteries every time you attempt the break-in. Now, because the topic of motor break-in is too broad and can take up an entire video on its own, I will upload a separate video. So check out my playlist for that one. It should cover the motor break-in process in more detail and several ways to do it. So it's now running at a maximum 22, 23. See? 24. So that's already like a 10% increase. Sorry, it's a 20% increase with a simple break-in like that. So let's run this on the track. So that was the performance using a broken-in motor, and as you can see, the speed is quite good. So now let's test the car with a faster motor. Now here's an example of a motor that I have broken in previously. It's still not as fast as I want it to be, and it does need more work. Anyway, here is the speed, and let's check this out on the track. thoughts, other than getting those bent wheel axles, the kit was of good quality, which is what you would expect from Tamiya. Once you get used to all the parts, building any AR chassis will become fairly simple. The only thing I suggest is you pay close attention to how you install the wheels and the rollers, and also how to break in the motor. This way you ensure that you build not only a stable car but a fast car each time. Lastly, if you stuck until the end, let me congratulate you for successfully building your first Tamiya Mini 4-wheel drive AR chassis kit. Now go watch my other videos in my playlist to learn how to build other kits using other Tamiya Mini 4-wheel drive chassis.